5-2, day 2. Our learning target says I can solve inequalities involving 1 or 2 steps. Our essential question is what causes the symbol to flip when multiplying an inequality? So our first question, very similar to that essential question, says why does the symbol flip if you multiply by a negative number? So multiply by a negative number. So we've already worked with dividing by a negative number, and we found out that if you divide by a negative number, the symbol flips. So now look at our examples. What happens if we multiply each side by -2? So we're starting with the inequality 4 is greater than 2. 4 is greater than 2. This is the bigger number right here, 4. So if we multiply each side by -2, what is going to happen to this inequality? So we're multiplying by -2. 4 times -2 is -8. 2 times -2 is -4. Because -4 is closer to 0, it is bigger than -8. So look at what happened with our inequality symbol in order for it to stay true. The inequality symbol had to flip. It had to flip because -8 is smaller than -4. We'll check another example. So what happens on this one if we multiply by -2? Just because you might be wondering if it's only true when your numbers are both positive. So this time we've got a positive and a negative number to show. So -8, so we started with -10. Sorry, we started with -10 is less than 8. That's true. A negative number is always smaller than a positive number. So now multiplying both sides by -2, a negative times a negative is a positive. A positive times a negative is a negative. So look what happened. 20 is the positive number, so this is bigger. 20 is bigger or greater than -16. So again, the symbol that started as a less than had to flip. So whether you're starting with a greater than symbol or a less than symbol, your symbol will flip if you are multiplying by a negative number. So now we know that if you're multiplying or dividing by a negative number, both of those things flip your symbol. So not adding, not subtracting, but multiplying or dividing by a negative number. Now, this is just a little reminder. What do we have to remember about multiplying when solving an inequality? If you multiply by a negative number or a negative fraction, you must flip your inequality symbol around. And I am going to even add up here if you multiply or divide, because that's what we worked on in our previous lesson. So if you multiply or divide by a negative number or a negative fraction, you must flip your inequality symbol around. All right, let's try some of these out now. So this inequality, circle my variable, says x divided by -2 is less than or equal to 11. The inverse of dividing by -2 is multiplying by -2. So I'm going to show that by using a dot for multiplication like this. Now, these -2's cancel out. Because I multiplied by a negative, so multiplied by a negative, I have to flip my symbol. So the inequality symbol changes. Bring down the variable x. 11 times -2 is -22. So -22. My greater than or equal to symbol means a closed circle going to the right. Two numbers that are to the right of -22 are -21 and negative 20 because I'm getting closer to 0. Second example. On this one, circle my variable. X is divided by 5, so I need to multiply by 5. Now, I am multiplying by a positive, so I do not change my symbol. Do not change my symbol. So I can cancel my 5s, bring down my X, keep my symbol. 5 times negative 8 is negative 40. Now, before I draw my graph, I need my variable on the left-hand side, so I'm going to reverse the whole thing. So X is less than negative 40. Negative 40, less than is an open circle. Numbers are smaller to the left. So less than negative 40 would be negative 41 and negative 42 because they're going further in the negative direction. Second slide of examples. Now, on this one, the negative sign is in front of the fraction. So what I am going to do with that negative sign is I am going to include it with the 3. So when I circle my variable on this one, I want to cancel out the negative 3. So I need to multiply by negative 3. Remember, a negative on a fraction, you can choose to put it on the top, bottom, or out in front. In this situation, it makes sense to put it with the 3 on the bottom so that we can cancel it out. Because we are trying to figure out what X is, not negative X. So I'm multiplying by negative 3. So that means, because I'm multiplying by a negative, I am going to flip my symbol. So again, this is the same. This is the same right here. And I want to get rid of the 3 and the negative sign, so it benefits me to move that negative down to the bottom. Okay, so now that I'm multiplying by negative 3, I can cancel these out. Negative 7 times negative 3 is positive 21. My variable is on the correct side, so I'm ready to graph. Closed circle, less than or equal to, goes to the left. Smaller than 21 would be 20 and 19. Our next example, X is being divided by 4, so I'm multiplied by 4, which is a positive, so I'm not flipping my symbol around. Multiply by 4. Keep my symbol. 4 times negative 1 is negative 4. Now, before I draw my graph, reverse the inequality to get the variable on the correct side. Negative 4. X is less than, so open circle to the left. Less than negative 4 would be negative 5 and negative 6. All right, now we've got something a little bit trickier because we've got a fraction here. So when we have a fraction times our variable, we learned a couple of different things that we could do. So on this example, I'm going to use the shortcut that we worked with. Hopefully some of you remember that we said to cancel out a fraction times your variable, you can multiply by the reciprocal. So multiply by the reciprocal. We've worked with reciprocals lately with perpendicular lines. So remember, reciprocal is when you flip over the fraction. So I'm going to multiply by negative 3 over 2 on both sides. That will cancel the 3's and the 2's and the negative sign. So it cancels the entire fraction. Because I multiply by a negative, I do need to flip my symbol. So flip my symbol, and then I'm putting a 1 under the negative 10 because multiplying fractions, you multiply straight across. So negative 10 times negative 3 is positive 30, and 1 times 2 is 2. I can simplify this. 30 divided by 2 is 15. So x is greater than or equal to 15. So I have a closed circle on 15. Greater than or equal to goes to the right. So I would have 16 and then 17 like that. My next example has a fraction again. So I'm going to do the same thing this time. Multiply by the reciprocal. So the reciprocal of 1/2 is 2 over 1. 2 over 1. I'm multiplying by a positive, so I do not need to flip my symbol. Cancel the 2's, cancel the 1's. Put a 1 underneath the negative 6 and multiply straight across. Negative 6 times 2 is negative 12. 1 times 1 is 1. So negative 12 divided by 1 is negative 12. So on my graph, negative 12, open circle, greater than goes to the right, and to the right of negative 12 is negative 11 and negative 10. So because this fraction was a positive fraction, the reciprocal is still a positive. You just flip it over. So you're not changing the sign like we did with perpendicular lines. Our last example is a word problem. So this one says, define a variable. That means choose a variable, write an inequality, and solve. Luke needs at least $3,500 to buy a car. If he earns $8.50 per hour, how many hours will he need to work to buy the car? So I'm going to use H for my variable to represent hours. If he is paid $8.50 per hour, I need to attach my letter H to that hourly wage. And then he needs at least how much money to make his purchase? Well, he needs $3,500, and at least means greater than or equal to. If he has less than $3,500, he cannot buy the car. So he has to have at least $3,500, so greater than or equal to. Then if you divide this on both sides, divide by 850, this will tell us how many hours he needs to work. So $3,500 divided by 850. So dividing this gives me 411, so 411.7647, and then it keeps on going. So I want you to think about that. Common sense. If I rounded it to 411, would he have enough money? No, because there's something after the decimal point in this situation. You're going to have to round it up in order to make the purchase. So I would say Luke needs to work. We need a sentence to answer the question because it's a word problem. So you need a sentence explaining it. Luke needs to work at least 412 hours to buy the car. All right, that's it. Hopefully you understand how to solve inequalities involving multiplication and division now, and you can remember that it's when you multiply or divide by a negative number or a negative fraction that you flip your symbol.